Hi there, it's Mandy from Creative Matters. I am just going to talk you through some painting techniques and showing children actual techniques is a really good thing. I think it gives them a lot of confidence when they're painting. Plus, it's part of the visual arts curriculum of, developing practical knowledge. So it's really good for you to kind of have an understanding of painting techniques and different ways you can approach painting. And you can actually just put this into your exploring or experimenting part of your process and give the children lots of opportunities in different ways to explore these painting techniques after you've demonstrated or after you've shown this video. And then, if they've had lots of practice, then they feel really empowered and confident when they start their final painting, instead of going straight into painting when they're not really quite sure how to paint. So it's also a really good thing for developing your color making techniques. So we've already looked at that. And then this is another way for you to kind of consolidate that learning really and give your children another opportunity to practice. So what I'm going to do is just now and then push the screen down to my table so you can see the painting. And I'm going to show you a few different things. We're going to look at what it means to paint in a painterly way, to add lots of texture using paint. We're also going to look at creating a really flat effect, which some artists do. We're going to look at the dry brush techniques and how to use your brush carefully to come up to edges and stay inside lines. And we're going to talk about underpainting and also, how much paint to apply and that kind of thing. So I hope you find it useful and you enjoy it. Perhaps you could have a go by yourselves while I'm talking. Paint along with the video if you want to, or watch the video and then have a go. And then it would be great if you could do this with your children, and I'm sure they'll really enjoy it. And the thing is, like all parts of the process, you can do all this learning and experimenting and then turn everything that you do, everything you make, into something that's really beautiful visually, and you can think about how you want to display that in your classroom. And then, of course, linking to literacy, where you can start writing about the processes and the names and the visual language that you've used. All right, so I hope it's useful. I'll see you in a minute. I'll push you down to the painting area. So what I've done here is just created some different shapes, which is quite a nice way to lead into talking about abstract painting, but also it gives children that practice of filling in a certain space. So this one here that I've done is a mixture of warm yellow, this one here, and cool red to make sort of an ochre orange color. And I've done that first because I want it to dry. But this is how you do underpainting. So underpainting is like creating another color underneath the actual colors that you've chosen to use. So it doesn't have to be anything really to do with the colors that you're choosing. Often a real sort of contrasting color can be cool, so like orange or ochre or red. And that is then just going to be painted over with your blues or your greens or whatever color you've chosen for your painting. But the nice thing is it just adds that extra beautiful depth. And painting on top of dry paint on a second layer just adds that much more coverage, I guess, so that it looks really good. So that's underpainting. We'll come back to that in a minute. I'm going to show you painterly, using a painterly technique. So I'm going to take my palette and I'll take another brush that's not painty. And I'm going to just make a turquoise to start with, which is one of my favorite colors to make, as you may know. And so again, you're consolidating these lovely color making techniques that you've been teaching the children. It's my white, cool blue, cool yellow. Let's take a bit more yellow. It's like a sort of light turquoisey blue. And when you're doing a painterly sort of approach, it's quite nice to not completely mix your color up. So I've still got other colors showing and plenty of paint. And then on my brush, I've got plenty of color in there. And then I'm just going to kind of add the paint in different ways. I still have to kind of do it very carefully up to the edge, because that is one of our goals, is trying to keep inside the shape. But of course, depending on your painting that you're doing, you might not want to stay inside the shapes. It might be able to be a bit rougher and more sort of organic. But just for this particular type of work I'm creating, I want it to be inside the shapes. I'm just coming up very carefully to the edge, not pushing my bristles down very hard, just using the tips of my bristles. And then you can see that I'm adding my paint in a way that's still quite thick and globby, and you can actually see the different colors inside there. So I haven't sort of smoothed out the color. I've allowed for it to be different colors to stay showing. And you're kind of almost just moving the paint around. It's so thick and yummy that you're sort of just moving the paint into the space like that. And then I've got some really nice little puddles of yellow and other bits of colors coming through. And it's called Painterly because it's like you can really get a sense of the paint, but also you can get a sense of the brush strokes. So you might be able to actually see the strokes that the artist is adding, which kind of adds something quite special. Whereas that one there is a lot flatter, although it's not a completely flat color. You can see different levels of opaqueness in your color. So that's Painterly, showing the different colors that you've made, not making it completely flat. And then if we just come down here again, I'll show you something that's more flat. So this time I'm going to change my color slightly and add more yellow. And this time I'm going to completely mix the colors so that they just show one color. There's not other colors in there. And just make sure you've got all your colors off your bristles so that you've just made one flat color. And this time we don't have quite as much paint on our brush, so you might take a little bit off so that you've got the color on there, but it's not really blobby and thick. And then for the flat color, we're kind of spreading the paint much thinner around the shape. So I'm going inside the shape to start with, and then I'm going to work my way up into the edges. Of course, I am rushing and doing it quickly. You will take a lot more time. Take it nice and slowly and carefully. And with a flat color, you'll see that there are quite a lot of artists, as I said, who use that sort of style, quite flat. It almost looks like it's been made on a computer. And you don't really get a sense of the brush strokes or the different colors inside your color. So we kind of work it so that you can't see any of those things, and you're creating a really flat color. So sometimes you've got to kind of go over again very lightly. You can see that my bristles aren't going right down like that. I'm just using the edges. And I'm just going to spread it out really carefully so that it has that sort of final very flat effect. Going back to the work that I did before, while the paint is still wet, you can easily do that. If it starts to dry, you could always just add a little bit more paint on your brush. Sometimes it's nice to turn around your paper like that so that you can kind of approach the part that you're working on more easily. So now I've filled in the whole color. Now I'm just going to go over again very lightly with my brush, just kind of try and make it as even and flat as I can. The same kind of thickness all over. You can see the difference between that one and the Painterly one, which is a lot more sort of interesting and textured. That one there takes quite a lot longer to dry, so make sure you've got plenty of drying time. And then this one you'll find dries quite quickly. It's quite flat. Okay, so I now want to talk to you about a wash. So a wash is just basically when you use water and then add color. So I've made this one a little bit earlier, still not quite dry. And what I did there was put water on the paper and then added the paint. That is a really nice way of covering a big piece of paper, making maybe a background color that then you're going to paint on top of. Can be really nice. So if you're going to be working on A3, put water all over the A3, add your color very lightly and let it blend with the water. And you can see in this one, it's quite textured. It almost looks like a sky because I haven't sort of completely brushed out all of the color. I've let it just kind of work in with the water, and that's created those interesting effects. So a wash can be quite handy. So let me just show you a wash. So it's good to use a much bigger, fatter brush, unless you're still working on a small area. So here we go. I'll take you down here again. So I've got a nice big fat brush like that, but obviously you don't need one that big. Still got a bit of blue on this brush. And you just get quite a bit of water and spread it over, and make sure you've got wet strength cartridge paper so that your paper doesn't get all crinkled, and that will be able to handle the extra water. So you can see there that is almost a very super light blue wash. It's a little bit hard for you to see. But now I'm going to add some colour. So you can see that brush there. I'm probably still going to use my big brush, sorry. So I'm actually going to just take the colour that I had before, just put a little bit on my bigger fat brush, and then I'm just going to sort of spread it around so you can go around in circles if you want to. And you can see that the paint is kind of just sitting on top of the water in some ways. And that's a really nice light wash. So you could keep it quite textured like that, or you can smooth it out so that it's very, it's a flatter color, but it still won't be completely flat because it's kind of working in with the water. Like that. It's quite nice. A little bit hard for you to see, I think. Sorry. And then if you wanted it darker, you could still do a wash that's a lot darker. So it's just going to have more paint. Same amount of water, but just more paint on it. Use different techniques for getting it on there. Swirling, and you could keep the swirls. I mean, that's a lovely thing about washes. You can actually have these beautiful patterns created in the water with the color on top. Or, as I said, you can smooth it out. Or you can do a bit of both. And just kind of have a play. I mean, it would be great for children just to do a whole bunch of different washes with different colors. And they can experiment with how much water they apply and how much color, different colors, and just sort of get a feel for what's happening. You could even do your color making or mixing on top of the water, see what happens there. So making a paint wash could be a whole lesson in itself. And then you could do really beautiful things with that wash, putting them all on the wall or photocopy them, like I said, and use them for collage materials, cutting up to create another artwork. So your children would love that, I am sure. Now I'm just going to show you one more idea, which is the dry brush. Okay, the dry brush, and then we'll go back to the underpainting. So dry brush is as it sounds. I might just change my color. And this time I'm going to use, I think, my warm red. So I'll put this down here so you can see. Warm red. Oh, I'm getting quite a lot of paint on my table here, but it's okay. It's my studio artist table. And some white, my favorite pink color. And dry brush is just as you would imagine. It's using quite a dry brush. So on another piece of paper, just get the excess off your brush. And then you can start with your dry brush technique. It's kind of almost like patting And you're not pushing down too hard, and you're not reapplying, you're not getting more paint onto your paintbrush. And you're just kind of enjoying that more sort of open, free style of the dry brush. So that's already, a little bit darker in the middle, but it looks quite interesting, doesn't it? Then you could also do another shape using what's left now, which isn't as much as over here. You can actually see some of the two colors that I've got in there. And then just spreading that dry brush so you've got that lovely paintbrush sort of stroke that you can see, but not a lot of color. And that's another technique, again, depending on the type of painting you're doing. Okay, now that underpainting is nice and dry now, so I'm going to show you what happens when you paint on top of another color. I'll use that same pink color. You can see that I've got my painting clothes on, my fur. Not really one for wearing painting aprons, although I probably should because I have a lot of paint on my clothes. And you can see the lovely deep coverage, that excellent coverage there that's gone over the top. And every now and then when you're painting like that, you might see just a sneak of that orange underneath, depending on how thickly you're going, or maybe just around the edge, which is quite a lovely feature as well. You don't always have to cover it completely. Okay, so those are some techniques there. You've got the wash, the flat color, the painterly, the underpainting, using texture, adding texture, and then that dry brush technique. And so then you can get really creative with how you put all of that together. So, I mean, the obvious for this, because I've made shapes, is to cut out the shapes, create a wash on a bigger piece of paper, and then have fun sort of experimenting with placing those shapes on your wash and then gluing them down. Or you could photocopy these and have double the amount of shapes and do something interesting with that. It's a really lovely lead into talking about abstract painting, where you're not actually making something realistic. It's just using shapes and pattern and creating something that perhaps reminds you of something or perhaps not. And then, yeah, there's lots of other ways that you could show the learning or the experimenting. You could just use this and then get them to do some sort of hill scene or something like that. Think, depending on the artist that you're using, you could get them to do something in response to that artist's work that you've thought of, but using this wash as a sort of background color. So hopefully that's given you lots of ideas and some good techniques. Have a go yourself, and I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you soon to talk more about the artists that you're going to choose for your classroom. Catch you soon. Thanks.